graphic nature of this program, listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to Chris's Hidden Metal Show. I'm Chris, and here we are. This is a weird one. This is episode 7/8, or just episode 7. I don't know. It's going to throw the whole order off, but it makes no sense to do two separate episodes for just 5 songs. But this is songs that I created and recorded during 2025. I'm recording this in 2026, by the way. So this is sort of a look back in the year of 2025. 2025 was a big year for me, and kind of shows why I only put out technically 5 songs, but there is a 6th one out there. I don't know if it's going to make it to this episode or not. I might add it later on. Let's see what we get to. That being said, since I was only able to get 3 songs together for the first part of the year, because once again, I always put out an episode on my birthday, and then I put out another episode on Halloween. Since I was so busy and I was only able to get to 3 songs, I decided to call this an EP. Remember EPs back in the day when albums people didn't put out whole albums, they only put out a couple of tracks. And, I'm more of an old school guy. I'm used to bands putting out whole albums. But nowadays, people put out, bands are like the new way of getting attention is just putting out songs as they're recorded and made. I kind of like the whole deadline thing because it kind of makes you force yourself to kind of get everything down before the deadline. I don't know if I could record where the song is just done, because for me, it's never done. You kind of give yourself a deadline, and then you go, okay, this is as good as it's going to get. And you try to do your best to get it to the point where you want it to be at. But the deadline sort of lets you, address it. They say art is never finished. It's just abandoned. And so I wouldn't know when to say, oh, this song is done. I mean, yeah, you have an idea, but sometimes, you go back and you listen to it. That's why when you make these albums, I would listen to them in the car and like, oh, maybe I want to change this part, or maybe I want to make this part louder or this part lower, or the vocals are way too high over here or something like that. So I don't know if I could ever get to the point where I could just release a song when it's quote unquote done. I kind of like the deadlines. But with that being said, since my output this year has been the lowest it's been since I started this project, I decided to call them EPs. They used to call them extended plays, where basically they were more than just a song or two, and not enough to be a complete album. So with that being said, I love this. I always kind of describe my music as ugly music for ugly people. And, not necessarily that being physically ugly. Excuse me. Wow. And I apologize if I sound, and I realize I listened to the last episode also. In the last episode, it was, I finally got 5 minutes to record. And of course, the 5 minutes I got to record was while I was in the middle of a heavy flu. And I'm pretty sure I hear myself now, and I'm pretty sure I sound pretty stuffed up and congested. So I'm sorry if I sound sickly, but quite frankly, this is the only time I get 5 minutes to record, so we got to get it down on wax. The show must go on, as they say. So this is volume 1 and volume 2 of Ugly Music for Ugly People. Once again, it's supposed to be 6 songs altogether. Right now it may just be for the 5 songs. Maybe I'll make number 6 a bonus track or something like that. So let's get started. The first song that we are going to get to is called Trend of the World. And this sort of, I don't want to say it came to me in a dream. That doesn't sound right. It sounds a little corny for me to say something like that. But I had, when you write songs, you do all the hits, you do, when you're doing heavy metal, there's the anti-religion, there's the anti-government, there's the fuck my ex-girlfriend, or fuck my ex in general. You hit all those. And I realized I never had a song that told a story, or if it did tell a story, it was sort of telling my story. I don't have a song. So this was sort of, in my mind, I see this as an episode of Black Mirror. And it kind of touches into my writing roots. I've written 2 novels, and I've written a couple episodes. I do like what they call spec scripts, when you have an idea, when you like a show that you like, and you kind of like write a script for an episode for that show. I kind of had this idea in my head. I think that came to me in a dream, where it's a take on social media, as all episodes of Black Mirror are. Everything's a cell phone or something. Everything has to do with like technology. And in this story, one day, these giant monoliths come from out of nowhere, presumably from outer space, from the aliens or something like that. And obviously, if something like that were to happen, nowadays when you watch modern disaster movies, they've added that extra element where if the aliens were attacking, or if there was something crazy going on that was like end of the world, people would have their phones out. People would be recording. And the way these things work is the monoliths come out, and the people who are filming the monoliths are getting incredible numbers, because, obviously the rest of the world wants to see it. The rest of the world wants to know what's going on. So as these people share the monoliths, it starts snowballing. More monoliths show up. The ones that are here get bigger. People try to do things like, they're floating in the sky, but there are people who can try to like reach them, and anybody who reaches and touches a monolith will die. So it's not like the monoliths are attacking people, but if you go and you touch it, you die. It's sort of like a take on toxicity. And in the story, there's scientists that study it or whatever, and it turns out that, and mind you, the monoliths, if you touch them or if they touch things get destroyed. And they get bigger the more attention you give to them. So scientists sort of study that, and they realize, hey, if we stop paying attention to the monoliths, they'll go away or they'll be destroyed. And so it becomes a worldwide effort for people to destroy their phones, to destroy social media. In a way, it feels like, society might be going backwards, but it's being done to save society, because as the monoliths touch things and people go and touch the monoliths, they are destructive and they are toxic. So that's sort of the idea that I had for end of the world, trending end of the world, trend of the world. So this is Industrious Bastards with Trend of the World.
They arrived without warning, some random midweek morning. No message, no threat, just presence. Monoliths giant, hovering and ancient. The brave or the desperate touch them first. Skin split, ears bled, eyes burst. But the footage, it exploded. Viral fame for their final moments. What did they want from our planet? We mindlessly just pointed our cameras. We mindlessly just pointed our cameras.
Cities fall. Selfies
and that was Trend of the World by Industrious Bastards. Now, as I've done in past episodes for you longtime listeners, I'm actually watching the videos in between. I purposefully, don't get me wrong, I take notes before I start the episode, but I purposefully want to wait to watch the videos before and after I record, just so I can let you know what I have in my notes, and then after seeing or hearing the song and seeing the video, sort of my initial reaction. And I do have to say, I really like the video for that song. I really like the way the visuals came out. It feels like a movie. It feels cinematic. One of the benefits of, I know I'm going to get shit for, using AI. Nobody likes AI, but for someone with a $0 budget, I really like the way the visuals came out along with the song. With a little bit of time and a little bit of editing, you can tell your story. And I know people hate AI, but how else would I make a video like that? How else would I make a Black Mirror episode? I have to sit around and do other things that I don't want to do. I enjoy being creative. I'm not a fundraiser. I'm not a person. I don't have connections like that of people that would just give me money for a creative project. Hopefully something like this gets a little attention, and then I can get the eyes and dollars of people who are willing to invest into my work, and I won't have to rely on AI. But for the time being, I like the visuals that it gives me. I understand that the controversy behind AI and things of that nature, but you know what? Pandora's box has been opened. What are you going to do? You're going to tell people to stop using their cell phones? You're going to tell people to stop using social media? No, it's not going to happen. So we might as well embrace the new paradigm of the Earth plus AI and generative AI when it comes to art and music. So I do have to say that I do love that video. Now these two EPs are once again in the same idea, the way the last album was with Contempt, where, here we go with the AI argument again. The songs were made in Udio. You kind of get an idea for a song, you write some lyrics down, you put the song together in Udio. And then what I did is I downloaded the stems, and then you engineer the stems, and you don't just use the stems, the plain flat stems. You kind of, you give it a little zhuzh, you give it a little pop and pizzazz. And then of course, then you re-record your vocals over it. And, it's not as simple as just re-recording your vocals. There's all the engineering that goes into that. So there is, human hands have touched this music. Human hands have, I'm not trying to put some other voice out there and saying that it's mine. No, it's my voice. I'm singing the vocals, I'm engineering the vocals, and I'm adding it to, tracks that were generated using AI. Do you know how hard it is to start a band? I've dealt with people and people that I respected, and people that I creatively, agree with and love their work. But, sometimes it's a bit of a headache. It's hard to collaborate with people. And, seeing that, I want things my way, sometimes you have to, go to the computer and let the computer make something and work with that. You can hurt people's feelings. People, can, I guess, I think the biggest, let's be honest here, is the biggest roadblock I've had dealing with creative people is some people are just flakes. We're all adults, and life happens, and we don't have the time to dedicate, and sometimes I may want to record something. I may want to do something at 3:00 in the morning because that's when I'm free, with my work schedule and stuff like that. 3:00 in the morning. So if I want to make music, it's not like I can call a friend over and say, hey, let's play some music. Let's, you play the guitar and I'll program the drums, and, we'll sing and we'll record at 3:00 in the morning. It's not that convenient. So, once again, some of the benefits of making music in AI. So these two albums are very much like the last album, Contempt, where the backgrounds and everything were made in Udio, generative AI, and then the vocals were added. And once again, to the detractors, I challenge you to put together a compelling song. It's not it right now. It's not as simple as giving it a prompt, giving it some lyrics, and having it just pop out something. Because yes, there are people who do it, and yes, there is a lot of quote unquote AI slop out there. I'm not going to doubt that, but you can tell the slop. You can see it. You can feel it. And when the lyrics are all the same kind of like generic nonsense, and at least I wrote the lyrics. The song, the AI made the arrangements, but there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of, it's not everything that you want to hear, and it'll pump out something and you're like, that's not what I'm going for. And, sometimes it'll make it sound in a different genre. This is not, if I'm making, I like to think of it as like nu metal with industrial influences. That's always a sound I kind of loved and I was going for. And if it puts out a song that sounds like, I don't know, let's say, 80s thrash. And as much as I love 80s thrash, and as much as I'm inspired by 80s thrash, and I love Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax, that's not the sound I'm going for, unless that's what I was thinking in the top of my head. So, it takes a lot of regenerating and regenerating and adding tracks. And then when the song hits its bridge and stuff like that, and then it's not as simple as it seems. And once again, anybody that detracts, I would love to see a process on doing it yourself. Other than, of course, starting a band with actual human beings. Okay, so I'm sorry about coughing. All right, so let's move on. And I guess you could say the detractors of AI, to me, are lame. And with that brings us to the next track. This song is called Lame. Initially, I will say that it was the initial inspiration that sort of got the juices flowing. Was an episode of, there's this TV show called The Studio, and it stars and is created by Seth Rogen, and it's about him being a studio producer, a guy who runs a studio, and every episode has to do with like the creative process and being creatives in a world that is sort of built around making money. So, you got people who want to make money, then you got people who want to create, and there's sort of that clash because, they're rarely on the same page. And in this particular episode, it's, if I'm not mistaken, I did a little research. It's episode 6. It's called The Pediatric Oncologist. And in the episode, Seth Rogen's character is going on a date with a girl, and they're sort of at this medical fundraiser thing. And everyone at their table are doctors and people in the medical field. And they're good people and they're well-intentioned people, but they're not creatives. They're brilliant people who are incredibly talented when it comes to saving lives and stuff like that. But when it comes to, he asks them if they've seen movies and stuff like that, and everyone at the table, they don't care about classic movies. They don't care about things of that nature. And I've certainly been there. And I know I nerd out about the things that I nerd about. And I'm not as much as a cinephile as, the characters in the TV show are. But I've been there where you've been when you're around the people, and I'm sorry if I'm using this word as in a derogative term, but the normies, the NPCs, the people who have, they're sort of going through life like robots. I think, and of course, look, everybody, the whole world needs its, the world needs its ditch diggers, the world needs its brain surgeons, and the world needs its creatives. And, when you're dealing with the NPCs, and this is more, I'm not, and this song is certainly not about the brain surgeons. This is more about the people that are just sort of floating through life, and they're consumers, and they have no intention of ever creating, and they have no intention, and they have no desire to create, which blows my mind. There's people that are happily content just buying things and sitting in their house, and they're creating their little crypt. They're creating their own little like grave. Surrounding themselves with like, and don't get me wrong. Look, I like, I have my toys and I have my nerdy things and I have things of that nature. Of course, we all kind of do it, but there are people that are totally content with living their whole lives without ever expressing themselves. And, I guess that's good. Moms have to raise babies, and dads have to raise babies also. I'm not trying to be a sexist here. There are people who are breeders and they're totally happy with just breeding. And I have my daughter and I love her to death, but I also want to create, there's other things, that I want to do with my life. And I guess, it's sort of frustrating. I'm in my midlife crisis right now. And, it blows my mind that there are people that are just totally happy with just existing and not leaving anything behind. And, I guess that's all good for them, but that's not for me. So, these people, these drones, these, people that are dead-eyed, that their whole lives are dictated by, what Jeff Bezos does and what, Mark Zuckerberg does and what Elon Musk tells them to do. These are people that are totally content with being consumers and fans. And that was my other thing is, I love my music. I love nu metal. I love thrash metal, and it's all fine and good. I want to create that music. Yeah, it's great to listen to albums. It's great to go to concerts. It's great to, if you want to buy merch and support these people, that's everything about that is 100% great. But I kind of want to make it too. For years I did a podcast and I interviewed a lot of, I've interviewed William Shatner and Rosario Dawson and Kevin Conroy, and people that are giants in the genre industry. But also, like, I want to be Kevin Conroy. I want to be William Shatner. I want to be Rosario Dawson. I don't want to be a consumer. I want to create stuff that make people want to interview me. And call that egotistical if you like. It's also being creative. It's sort of your legacy. It's what you leave behind, and influences other people. It's certainly a good alternative to being destructive. It's certainly a better alternative to hating life. You've got to be a little creative. So that's a long-winded way of saying, do something with your life, create something, make something. Don't just sit there and be a passive consumer. So let's move on to the next song. This is Industrious Bastards with Lame.
Sheep in a slaughterhouse, clones in a cage, sellouts pleased to earn a slave wage. Milk-toast cucks, forging their own chains. NPCs, if life was a game. Soy-fed masses, blended control. Normies worship the dreams they were sold. Puppets and cubicles, drones with dead eyes. Corporate chill is their agenda of lies. You're all fucking lame, lame. You all make me sick, sick. You should all fucking die and suck my dick. Consumers brainwashed to dictate their activity. Algorithm addicts with basic pitch proclivity. Distracted by shiny things, content with mediocrity. Oblivious to the breakdown of society. Pacified posers, disrespecting their roots. Background players, zombies in suits. Misguided suburban knights, licking the boots. Yes, man, lobbyists, denying the truth. You're all fucking lame, lame. You
And that was Industrious Bastards with Lame. Wow. It's been a while since I've watched that video in its entirety while I'm taking notes, but obviously it's something I made. I'm going to love it. I should love it. That's the way it should be. Artists should be able to love the things they create. I think my favorite shot in that video is the three friends taking a selfie, and there's like a fire in the background, and it's not like it's not meant to be like they're taking a selfie at a fire. I think they were going to take a selfie, and the fire just happened to be in the background. Like as people so busy living for social media, living for those moments to share with people, that they're totally ignoring the things going on behind them. And once again, listening to the song, giving it having a little bit of distance and coming back to it, I do understand that some people may take some of the messages as like a toxic masculinity, and that's a little bit deliberate, but it's also like it's also just like stop being passive, stop being taken advantage of, stop being assert yourself, be creative, do something with your life, instead of letting the decisions be made for you by four giant corporations. And it's kind of funny because while I'm watching the video, I'm actually watching the videos on YouTube, and the suggestions of the videos next. And as I'm recording this in the beginning of 2026, there is a video about the death of MTV, which kind of just hit me right in between the transition of these two songs, because so much of culture was at least I could say for my generation was driven by MTV. And when I make the videos, I clearly, when I have the credits at the beginning and the end of the videos, those are obviously inspired by MTV. That has like the name of the band, the name of the track, the name of the album, the name of the director, which is always me because I'm the only one. I don't know if I'd ever like hand the reins over to another person and let them make a video. I'm just too much of a control freak, or this is too much my baby, or quite frankly, it's not like someone's going to do it for free. So I sort of, but I threw the director in there because I think that was one of the things they had. I think also like MTV back would also have probably like the name of like the company, like like Sony or MGM or whatever, whoever was the company that was making the albums, printing the albums, the record companies, which kind of is funny because it helps bring us over from lame people who follow trends to a lame trend, something. And it's sort of weird for me to say, calling something a trend that has actually dominated the scene for over 20 years. And I know I sound like an old man yelling at a cloud. Obviously, calling the music that I make nu metal. And nu metal sort of peaked at the mid 2000s, and I say that as a joke, but I also I say music died in 2004 or maybe 2005. I think the last great album that had come out, I would probably say, is System of a Down's Mesmerize. And don't be wrong, I liked Hypnotize, but I have very few new bands on my Spotify playlist. And of course, Spotify is the issue here also. Let's, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. I use Spotify and I listen to music using Spotify, and that also, the age of, downloading MP3s and downloading albums and torrenting albums, that kind of went away in the mid 2000s also. Because iPods, iPods were excuse me. Let me not rewrite history. I was still listening to downloaded music well into the 2015, 2016, or I think at my most, and I'm not even exaggerating here, I had like 17,000 songs on like, on old hard drives and old CDs and like the files themselves on CDs. So I was, for someone who torrented a lot of music, now I'm using AI, so I guess I'm part of the problem. But the curation of music, with the beginning of Spotify, and I guess you want to say the beginning of iTunes and stuff like that, where albums stopped becoming albums. People stopped listening to music as a whole. If you like the band or whatever, you would probably like the song or two, and you would buy the song on iTunes and just listen to that. And now the same thing on Spotify, where you like a track and you put the track into a playlist. And Spotify has a terrible habit of, it doesn't necessarily shuffle. One of my main playlist is, I think you can get like 9,000 songs in a play. Like I think you can't hit 10,000 or something like that. And so like my main playlist, is 800 songs or something like that. The stuff that I really, really listen to. That's like my hardcore playlist that is sort of like my default. And, and you hear the same songs. And it's like, and there's other songs on there. There's other, and it's like, how come I haven't heard X, Y, and Z in so long? I know it's on the playlist. It doesn't give you a genuine shuffle. And I guess I kind of missed that from the old iPods also, was like a genuine shuffle where it would kind of just literally play random songs. So as society has sort of become a little less of a monoculture, and we don't have MTV anymore. We don't have Headbangers Ball to kind of like give us the taste of music. And I think that sort of helped with the rise of metalcore. and as much as I despise metalcore, and in the beginning, in the early years, when I say like bands like Killswitch Engage or Chimera, they were on my playlists, and I downloaded their albums, but I didn't really like it. I kind of I knew there was something different about it, and as much as I didn't like those bands, then the ones that came after it, in my mind, felt worse. It felt like, and that's sort of the allegory I'm going for the song, it felt like people pretending to be metalheads, making music that they think metalheads want to hear, if that makes any sense. I use the phrase, simulacrum or simulacra, which is, obviously based on, I was a big fan of The Matrix and the philosophy of The Matrix and stuff like that, where when you make something that's a copy of something, when it becomes like, what's the word I'm looking for? They said, what if you made a map that was to scale? What if you made a map that, was as big as the land that it's on? It may be as big as the land that it's on, but it's not the real thing. It's not the ground. It's a map. It's a copy. And metalcore and the other versions, deathcore and post-hardcore, it all feels like people that kind of grew up safe, and they grew up liking metal, they grew up liking new metal, but now that they're older, like they're sort of like, it's not mocking, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's sort of they're doing what they think is metal, but it feels very disingenuous and screaming. It's called, the song is called Metalcore Sucks, and the Anti-Blegh song. And the thing about metalcore, especially in the past, 10 years, which is hardly a trend, I understand, is sort of like, these blast beats, these quantized drums, like they're super duper fast that, maybe 3 humans on the planet could actually play that fast, and everything else is sort of a imitation. It would be, this can only be made in a computer. And the people like, oh, they want it so fast and so extreme and so fast and so extreme that it's not attainable by human human body parts anymore, and the vocals and blah, 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 blah. And and don't be wrong, I loved death metal growing up, not loved, but I mean, it was I would listen to it here and there, and black metal, and I understand the vocals extreme, but it almost feels like people are doing it to. Everyone's trying to outdo each other to show how quote unquote metal they are, and then it just becomes this weird bullshit arms race of who can do things the most extreme, and then the music's not music anymore. It's funny that people could still listen to music from 25 years ago. Newer bands will say they got inspired by Korn and Limp Bizkit and things of that nature. Will people be in 20 years? Will people be inspired by Bring Me the Horizon and Sleep Token and what's the other one? And Spirit Box and all these. I don't understand these bands, and I'm pretty sure the musicians are great people, and you can throw all your stones and say, hey, I'm making AI music while they're out there doing the real deal. And once again, I know I sound like an old man yelling at a cloud, but I just don't understand metalcore. It feels like a copy of a copy of a copy. It sounds like like a parody of the music without but they're not. They're not being parodies. They're being genuine, which is scary. It's like like a foreigner decided, if they came to America and like, I'm going to be American, and they wore the an American flag fanny pack, and all they ate was cheeseburgers, and they yelled everywhere they went, and and they drank domestic beer and stuff like that, and belched, and it's like, you're not really being an American, bro. I understand that's what you think Americans are, but you're sort of being you're being a stereotype. But they're like, no, I'm being American. Look how American I am. I'm like, no, you're being an asshole. So, and that's sort of the idea. And I think it's lame. I really think the newer metal's lame. We've gotten a little more sensitive as a society, and once again, I'm not trying to be male toxic masculinity, but there is this sort of pushback against posers who are like, oh, stop gatekeeping. Well, metalcore is what happens when you let the posers make the music, or when you let the posers decide what's influential, and I think people kind of they quote unquote they follow the music for vibes. That's the big word nowadays, vibes, but it's garbage. It's there's a couple of influencers that are sort of pushing the genre, and they get eyes for it and everything like that. But I don't think they're being genuine. For people who follow YouTube stuff, Finn McKenty, he left this channel, and even he said before he left that it was sort of like a grift. And of course, I think it's sort of like sour grapes. He never got to the point where he wanted to be, so he then just like turned into the villain, said it was a grift. But Finn McKenty really started trying his best to push metalcore, and he really wanted to be like the guy that championed that genre. And when it just wasn't hitting the way he wanted it to hit, and he went to making videos about nu metal and stuff like that. And the funny thing is the videos about nu metal got 10 times the numbers that he did when he made trying to be like, he was leading the charge of the metalcore bands and things of that nature. So, I think that's what happens when you don't gatekeep. You let the lamos make music, and you let the lamos dictate what's going to be popular. And look, I know it's the way of the world. I know it's the progression of time. The quote unquote metalheads from the 80s who grew up listening to thrash, and even if you want to get a little more lame and like hair metal and things of that nature, or even like the old school like new wave of British heavy metal, like the Iron Maidens and stuff like that. Those guys, though they're diehard fans, hated nu metal. Those guys hated grunge when the 90s came, and that was sort of like, how dare you call this metal? When you have the guys who liked the studded leather jackets and stuff like that. I understand it's the progression of time, and I understand things change, but I could understand that people, you can go back and listen to Iron Maiden and say this is great. You can go back and listen to Korn and say this is great. I don't know if in 20 years people are going to like be saying, "Oh, let's listen to Bring Me the Horizon." You know, besides that one song that's in the meme that's like "Let Me Feel Your Heart," "Let Me Feel Your Heart." I can't name one other song of theirs. You know, I could certainly not name a Sleep Token song or a Spirit Box song, but I keep hearing those names being brought up, and I've tried to listen to them. I've tried to, you know, when stuff comes up in the algorithm, I'll give it a shot, and I just roll my eyes. I can't do it. So let's. So this will be the end of Ugly Music for Ugly People, Volume 1, and this is Industrious Bastards with Metalcore Sucks, the Anti-Blegh song.
Yo! This ain't